Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that the whole universe is whispering something just to you. It's not a warning or an order. It's a call, a silent invitation from the deepest place of existence. But there's so much noise, outside and inside us, that this sacred message gets lost. We live in an age where speed has become a virtue and silence a threat. Time seems to slip through our fingers, filled with obligations, screens, and distractions. And in the midst of it all, the soul whispers, quietly. But who still listens to the soul? Maybe you're at that point in your journey, a moment when everything seems to work on the outside, but there's an emptiness that you can't fill. Or maybe you've already experienced the collapse, the loss, the illness, the breakdown. And in the abyss of suffering, a new listening has begun to emerge. The call of the universe rarely arrives like a flash. It is subtle, almost imperceptible. Because it doesn't speak to the mind, it speaks to the field. It speaks to the vibration of your being. Most people live disconnected from this field, not out of malice, but out of conditioning. We've been taught to look outside for answers, to fear the unknown, to doubt the invisible. But the truth is that the entire universe is invisible to the ordinary eye. They are frequencies, patterns, vibrations, and to access them you have to change the internal channel. The call of the universe is happening right now, but only 1% are tuned in enough to pick it up. This journey that we're going to take together in this video is about this listening. We live in an age in which excess has become the norm. Too much information, too many demands, too many expectations, too many stimuli. Everything seems urgent, everything seems necessary. But in this sea of obligations and distractions, we have lost our fine listening skills. That listening that doesn't come from the ears, but from the heart. The one that recognizes the whispers of the universe. The great paradox is that the more connected we are to the outside world, the further we move away from our inner selves. The noise isn't just in the notifications flashing across the mobile screen. It's in the restless mind that never silences. It's in the constant comparisons, the judgments we make about ourselves, the silent pressure to always be better. This noise creates a thick vibrational layer that makes it difficult to perceive what is subtle, what is true. Anxiety disguised as productivity distances us from presence. And without presence, there is no vibrational perception. Alan Watts used to say that the menu is not the meal. In other words, talking about spirituality, consuming spiritual content, doing automated practices is not the same as living in a state of presence. True connection requires internal availability. And this is rare in times when we are always on the move, physically, mentally, emotionally. We are constantly on the move, but we hardly move inwards. Modern neuroscience already recognizes the impact of stimulus overload on our perception. Our brains have been programmed to pick up on what is new, threatening, or rewarding. And that means that when we're immersed in notifications, goals, and fast-moving content, our nervous system goes into survival mode. In this mode, there is no room for contemplation. And without contemplation, the sacred goes unnoticed. But what if true listening began precisely when the mind fell silent? What if the universe wasn't silent? It was we who were deaf. This spiritual deafness is not a flaw. It's an invitation. A call to return to what is essential, to what vibrates deep within. Start by observing. What do you hear when everything outside is silent? What does your soul try to tell you when you stop running? The universe doesn't compete with noise. It waits. It waits for you to come back, that you remember, that you choose to listen again. This is the first key to understanding the call. It's not about seeking more. It's about being silent enough to realize that the call is already there. It has always been there. It was just waiting for you to be ready to listen. Control is a comfortable illusion. The feeling that we have absolute control over the events in our lives gives us a false sense of security. But this attempt to control everything, every step, every choice, every reaction from others, actually blocks one of the deepest channels of communication with the universe: surrender. The call of the universe does not resonate in environments where fear commands, because control is born of fear. Fear of suffering, of making mistakes, of failing, of not being enough. When we live in a constant attempt to predict the future, we directly interfere with the natural flow of life. We become so busy trying to guarantee tomorrow that we stop listening to the now. And it's in the now that the universe whispers. It always has been. It always will. Synchronicity, as Carl Jung taught us, is a mysterious alignment between internal and external events. But it only happens when we don't try to force it. Surrendering to the flow is not being passive. It is in fact a gesture of immense courage, because it requires trust. It requires you to be willing to walk even without a map. It requires vibrating at a frequency of deep acceptance. Not conformist acceptance, but a vibrational acceptance that recognizes, I am part of something bigger, and I trust that this something bigger is guiding me. Bruce Lipton shows us through epigenetics that our thoughts and emotions shape our biology, and emotions such as fear, anxiety, and rigidity, so present in those who try to control everything, generate a dense, low-frequency energy field, a field where the whisper of the universe cannot penetrate. But when we relax our hearts, when we take a deep breath and say to ourselves, it's okay not to know, something opens up, and it is in this open space that spiritual guidance can finally arrive. The universe is like a river. It flows. It doesn't bend to the will of those who build dams, but it gives itself entirely to those who learn to swim with it. Trying to control it is like rowing against the current, exhausting, lonely, and unproductive. Conscious surrender, on the other hand, is like opening your arms and trusting that the waters will take you exactly where you need to be, even if it's not where you want it to be. Florence Scovel Shinn said, "Fear is inverted faith. It's having faith in evil instead of faith in good." And that sums up the paradox. The more we want to control, the less we trust. And the less we trust, the more the universe is silent, because it doesn't shout. It waits for the field to be clear. The mind is serene, the heart is receptive. The practice here is simple but powerful. Choose every day to let go of something, an expectation, a plan, a rigidity. Just let go. And notice how when you let go, you don't lose control. You align with the flow. You don't become vulnerable, you become receptive. And maybe in that small act of surrender, you'll hear something new. Something that has always been there. Something that control insisted on drowning out. The wisdom of life speaking to you, for you, through you. We live in a time when spirituality has often been converted into aesthetics, in appearance, content to be consumed rather than experienced. The call of the universe, however, does not manifest itself in ready-made phrases or in publications with sunset backgrounds and mantras. It is silent, often uncomfortable. Because true spiritual awakening isn't pretty, it isn't linear, and it almost always disrupts the ego. The trap of performative awakening is subtle but profound. It turns the search for truth into a performance. The person dresses as spiritual, speaks as spiritual, acts as spiritual, but doesn't feel. They don't dive in. They are not truly transformed. They stay on the surface of the ritual in the mechanical repetition of words that have not yet incarnated in their hearts. This kind of awakening is fueled by the fear of rejection and the need to belong. We want to be seen as higher beings. We want to prove that we are on another level of consciousness. But true awakening doesn't want to prove anything. It just wants to liberate. And liberation often means going through phases of confusion, sadness, anger, silence, and loneliness. None of this is Instagrammable, but all of it is profoundly true. Alan Watts said, "The most dangerous illusion is that of separation." And performative awakening is precisely an attempt to stand out, to appear separate, above, special. But the essence of awakening is recognizing that we are part of the whole. That light is not to be displayed, but radiated. That silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of spirit. The universe doesn't communicate with those who pretend. It reveals itself to those who say goodbye to masks, to those who have the courage to say, "I don't know, I'm lost, I'm searching." Because it is in this recognition of vulnerability that the field opens up. It is on this ground of humility that grace descends. Rituals can be profound. Affirmations can be transformative. Meditations can open portals. But it all depends on the vibrational intention. It's not the ritual itself that matters, but the state of presence with which it is done. As Muji used to say, better a minute of true silence than hours of empty words. This trap also creates a false dichotomy. The idea that spirituality is always calm, always light, always smiling, but the human soul is vastness, and awakening is often chaotic. It requires deconstruction. It calls for silence. It calls inwards, not upwards, not outwards, but inwards. And it is in this internal dive that we find what is real. The practice here is that of radical honesty. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I posting this? Why am I saying this? If the answer is to appear, perhaps it's time to pause, to come back to yourself, to sit in silence and simply feel. Because true awakening doesn't need an audience. It happens in the early hours of doubt, in the unexplained cries, in the long pauses between one breath and the next. It is in this intimate space that the universe speaks, without stages, without likes, no filters, just you, your soul, and the vibrational field that sustains everything. We live in the age of instant rewards. Likes, messages, notifications, short videos, online shopping, quick deliveries. Everything is designed to give us little spikes of pleasure, constant bursts of dopamine in the brain. But what few people realize is that this natural chemical, responsible for motivating us and giving us a sense of pleasure, has become a silent saboteur of our inner listening. Dopamine itself is not a villain. It's a fundamental neurotransmitter for the healthy functioning of the brain. The problem begins when we come to depend on these quick spikes to feel alive. This dependency recalibrates the brain to always seek more stimulation, more distraction, more consumption. And in the process, we lose the ability to remain silent, to be with what is, to endure the fertile emptiness of presence. The soul doesn't speak on the frequency of dopamine. It communicates in subtle waves, in the pause between one thought and another, in the space between two breaths. And when we are conditioned to seek constant gratification, silence becomes unbearable. That's why so many people say they can't meditate. They can't stop. They feel anguish when they're alone with themselves. But this anguish isn't a problem. It's a gateway. It's the start of the vibrational detox process. Joe Dispenza explains that the brain, when conditioned for years to fast dopamine, goes into automatic cycles. The mind wakes up and reaches for the phone. It already wants to check something. It already feels a need it can't even name. And so the soul is silenced. The universe doesn't compete with notifications. It waits. It observes. It remains present, but it doesn't impose itself. Its language is different. Its vibration is slower, deeper, and more stable. This explains why so many people feel that they don't receive signals, that they don't hear answers, that they don't perceive synchronicities. It's not that the universe isn't speaking. It's just that our sensitivity to hearing it has been dulled. We have the channel down, tuned into the noise but deaf to the essence. And herein lies the paradox. The more we seek immediate pleasure, the further we move away from lasting joy. Because true joy, the kind that fills, pacifies, and heals, doesn't come from outside. It comes from the encounter with oneself, from reconnecting with the soul, from listening deeply to what life is trying to teach us right now. Greg Braden talks about coherence between heart and brain as a key to accessing the quantum field. But how do we create coherence in a hyperstimulated and fragmented system? The first step is to pause, slow down, practice presence, and above all, learn to stay with the initial discomfort of silence. Because it is in this silence that detoxification begins. The practice here is very simple but powerful. Choose a moment in your day to disconnect. No screens, no music, no distractions. Just you, your breath, and the sound of the present moment. It may be uncomfortable at first. It may seem pointless, but insist. Because every minute you spend in this state, you are reconfiguring your system. You're fine-tuning your inner antenna. You're clearing the channel through which the universe speaks. And if at first all you feel is boredom, anguish, or restlessness, celebrate. Because that means you're coming out of anesthesia. You're feeling again. And when you feel again, even if it hurts, you start to listen. And what your soul has to say is worth infinitely more than any likes. There is a silent restlessness that accompanies those who are awakening spiritually. The yearning for signs, the constant search for clear answers, for confirmation from the universe, for messages hidden in license plates, repeated numbers, symbolic dreams. This search, although legitimate in its origin, can become a vibrational obstacle. Because there is a subtle paradox. The more anxiously you search for signs, the more they seem to escape. And not because the universe is denying them, but because your vibration in this state of frantic searching is misaligned with true listening. The universe communicates in a language other than linear logic. It speaks through synchronicity, intuition, and the silence between events. And to perceive these messages, you need to be in a state of vibrational receptivity, not anxious expectation. When we are restless, tense, obsessed with finding a signal, we emit a frequency of lack. And this frequency is not compatible with the field of wisdom we wish to access. Neville Goddard spoke about the importance of vibrational acceptance. For him, the secret of manifestation lies not in desperately seeking, but in assuming, in feeling as if it were already real. It's not about ignoring reality, but about vibrating in coherence with the reality you want to co-create. And this is only possible when we let go of our desire with confidence and not with pressure. It's like trying to see the bottom of a choppy lake. The more you move around, the more you touch the water trying to see, the murkier it gets. But when you stop, when you simply observe, when you breathe, the water begins to calm down. And then slowly the bottom reveals itself. This is also how the universe communicates. It reveals itself in serenity, not urgency. This is one of the biggest pitfalls of the contemporary spiritual path. Confusing movement with progress, thinking that always searching is a sign of evolving. But sometimes real progress comes in the pause, the moment you stop searching and just be. Because it is in this being, in this state of presence and acceptance, that the field begins to respond. David Bohm, physicist and philosopher, said that the universe is not a collection of separate parts, but an interconnected totality, an implicit order where everything resonates in unity. This means that often the sign we are looking for is already here, but we don't recognize it because we expect it to come in a grand, specific, theatrical way, when in fact it comes in simplicity, in an unexpected conversation, in a sensation in the body, in a silent insight in the middle of the routine. What happens when you let go of the search is that you open up space, and that space is fertile. It's where cosmic consciousness can germinate something new. It is in this space that the whisper of the universe can finally be heard, because the mind is no longer trying to control, understand, or interpret. It just is. The practice here is that of vibrational surrender. Instead of asking, "What's the signal?" ask, "How can I align with peace now?" Instead of demanding answers, cultivate silence. And in that silence, you may realize that the greatest sign of all is your own awakening consciousness. The simple fact that you are here, hearing this, feeling this, is already the universe in action. It's not what happens outside. It's what's vibrating inside. And when the vibration changes, the universe responds. It always has. But only now are you ready to notice. She was what many would call an accomplished woman. She had a solid career, a stable marriage, and an admirable social circle. In the eyes of the world, she was an example of success and balance. But the universe doesn't move by appearances. And one day, everything began to fall apart. First, it was her job, an unexpected cut, a cold meeting, a door that slammed shut. Then came the collapse of the relationship. Long silences, sharp words, and irreversible estrangement. And finally, the most devastating feeling, the loss of identity. Who was she without the job, without her wedding ring, without the routine that defined her existence? At first there was despair. Sleepless nights, unanswered questions, guilt, shame, fear. She felt small, disposable, invisible. And it was in this abyss of emotions that something began to change. Because the universe, when it takes everything away, isn't punishing. It's making space. It's clearing the stage for a new performance. More authentic, deeper, more aligned. In the first few months, she resisted. She tried to rebuild what she had lost. She sent out CVs, sought advice, clung to old versions of herself. But nothing fit. Everything seemed forced, disconnected. That's when, exhausted, she stopped fighting. And at that very moment, something began to emerge. Not a clear answer, not a new job offer, but a presence, a subtle realization that there was something bigger at work, something that, although invisible, seemed profoundly wise. It was in this space of silence and pain that she began to hear the call. At first, it was just a feeling, a desire to walk more slowly, to read different things, to listen to old music that touched the soul. Then came clearer signs. Unexpected encounters, vivid dreams, intuitions that led to simple, but profoundly right decisions. She began to write, texts that weren't intended to become books, but that cleansed her heart. She began to meditate, not as a technique, but as a refuge. She rediscovered the art of breathing, observing, of doing nothing. And in that doing nothing, she found herself, the woman behind the professional, the soul behind the character, the divine spark behind the pain. Little by little, new opportunities arose. But this time they weren't accompanied by anxiety or urgency. They were natural invitations in tune with her new vibration. And the most important thing, she no longer depended on them to feel whole, because she had found herself again. She had understood that the collapse wasn't an end, it was a portal. This true story reminds us of something profound. The universe sometimes needs to dismantle everything that is false in order to reveal what is true. The call doesn't always come as a clear blessing. It often comes disguised as loss, of chaos, of brokenness. But if we look with spiritual eyes, we realize that there is an invisible thread sewing everything together, and that thread is consciousness itself awakening. The teaching here is clear. When everything falls apart, ask yourself not why, but what for. Ask yourself what in you is being invited to be reborn. Ask yourself what needs to be freed. Because in the center of the void, there is room for the essential. And the essential is where the call lies. Imagine yourself in a desert, shovel in hand, digging tirelessly for water. The scorching sun punishes your skin, sand gets in your eyes, sweat drips down your face. You dig and dig and dig, because they say that somewhere there is a spring. And you believe that the deeper you dig out, the closer you'll be to it. But what if the water isn't outside? What if the river flows inside? That's the metaphor for the call of the universe. It's like an underground river, silent, invisible, but infinitely present. And it can only be heard when we stop digging outside. When we let go of the obsession with external answers, recognition, and logical solutions. When we sit down, close our eyes, and dive in. Most people are conditioned to look outside themselves. Courses, gurus, books, formulas, validations. Not that all this can't be useful, but when used as a substitute for inner listening, it becomes noise. The external search is the shovel that digs into the sand. Inner listening, on the other hand, is the silence that reveals the water. The universe communicates from our inner field. As Rudolf Steiner said, the human being is a microcosm of the universe. All cosmic wisdom is in a way imprinted in our being, but it only becomes active when there is space, when there is stillness, when there is a willingness to listen, not to dominate. The river does not force, it flows. It skirts stones, crosses roots, carves paths. And we often try to do the opposite, force it, control it, speed it up. But spiritual flow only reveals itself when we align ourselves with the fluidity of life, when we surrender to the natural rhythm of the soul. This metaphor of the underground river also shows us something profound. The water is there, even when we don't see it, even when everything seems dry, even when the surface is barren. Silence is not absence, it is a profound presence. And when we learn to listen to it, we realize that the universe was never absent. We were the ones who were distracted. Florence Scovel Shinn said that the power is in the silent now. And that silent now is the access point to the inner river. It's where the call echoes, not as an order, not like a manual, but as a whisper, a breeze, a feeling that something inside us knows the way. The practice here is symbolic and transformative. Stop digging, sit down, breathe. Imagine that there is a river beneath your feet. Imagine that every breath you take sinks you a little deeper into that silent current. And there, in this imaginary dive, ask yourself, what do you already know about me? Don't wait for an immediate answer. Feel it, trust, stay. Because only 1% of people have the courage to stop digging outwards and start digging inwards. But those few discover that the universe is not far away. It pulses in every heartbeat. It flows in every silence heard. It lives eternally in that river that flows inside you. We have reached the end of this journey, but perhaps this is where it truly begins. Because the call of the universe is not an event. It is a frequency. It is not something that comes from outside. It is something that vibrates within all the time, waiting for you to be present enough to hear it. Maybe you have spent your life searching for this call. In temples, in relationships, in answers. Maybe you thought it would come as a light, an epiphany, a heavenly voice. But now you know, it is more subtle, more silent, and therefore more powerful. The call of the universe does not come to the mind that analyzes. It comes to the heart that feels. It does not come when we are trying to prove something. It blossoms when we finally allow ourselves to be who we are. It is in this space of surrender, where there are no more masks, where there is no more rush, where there is no more pretense, that cosmic wisdom reveals itself. During this video, you have explored many internal territories. You have recognized the noises that prevent subtle listening. You have looked at the desire for control that prevents fluidity. You have unmasked performative spirituality. You have understood the impact of dopamine on the vibrational field. You have accessed the paradox of invisible signs. You have heard a story of real rebirth, and you have delved into the metaphor of a river that flows within. All of this was not just information. It was vibration. It was energetic practice. It was healing. And now the final invitation is not to do more. It is to be more silence, to be more presence, to be more space where the universe can inhabit. Because the call is not heard with the ears, it is felt with the whole body. It pulsates in the form of intuition, of synchrony, of inexplicable sensation. And the more you align yourself, the more it reveals itself. Today, before going to sleep, sit for 5 minutes. Breathe. Bring your hands to your heart and ask yourself, which part of me still resists the call? Then just listen. Even if there is no clear answer. Even if all you feel is silence. Because silence, when listened to with the soul, is the language of the universe. Maybe only 1% of people are really listening to this call. But if you have come this far, maybe you are that 1%. Maybe the universe is at this very moment passing through you, not to take you somewhere else, but to bring you back to the center, back to the now, back home.